Talking about space earlier, weren't we? And times are tough, money is in short supply and inflation is biting into people's livelihoods. But there remains an argument to be had about what sort of things we fund.
Yeah, and this follows the news that the UK Space Agency has agreed a deal with an American company to fund an all-British mission into orbit for research purposes.
So, should we spend more on the final frontier of space, or should we redirect our priorities to rebuilding Britain?
Well, let's speak now to space expert Andy Lound, who wants more space investment, and UKIP leader Neil Hamilton, who thinks we have higher priorities on the ground. Why don't we start with you, Andy? So I know you're obsessed about space. In fact, your enthusiasm knows no bounds. But what do you say to those of us who think, well, how about we can't even build a train to Manchester? Let's get things right on Earth first and spend the wonga on terra firma.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Yeah, I mean, this is a common argument that comes up on this one all the time, but of course we can't not afford to spend money on space research. The technological developments alone is what we actually use all the time in our lives to this day. This programme would not go out if it hadn't been for space research, development of satellite technologies. Also, we need the money to be spent to divert resources that we're going to need for this planet, which we can't get from our own planet at the moment because we'll be running out of those, and they're going to be needed from space. We need to protect our planet, asteroid impact and things like that. That's going to happen sooner or later. It will happen, so we need to be able to protect ourselves from there. The medical developments that we've had, which we don't need to keep people alive in space, have come down straight down here for the Earth. The technology that we use in many hospitals now, that's come from space research. So a lot of the materials that we actually need to actually survive now actually comes out of space research itself. And we want to get young people involved in sciences and things like that. And space research is actually brilliant for actually attracting young people to do it. The argument, which I think was the premise of what you were saying, is whether the government should spend all the money on it. I think there needs to be a partnership with private sector, which in the real world is actually what actually happens. I mean, you had a great speaker on earlier talking about the hovercraft when that was the old NRDC funding projects like that, and they, for instance, funded the hydrogen fuel cell, which eventually was used on the Apollo program, which got people to the moon. And that would have been a technology which was developed in America after we started it and given back to us. And had we developed that, we wouldn't have the green technology issues we've got now, because we would have actually had technologies available to help us with those things. And therefore space science is the way to go forward to push our technologies to actually help this planet.
What do you make of that, Neil? I mean, Andy makes some good points there. Space technology is the way to go forward. And also, lots of our daily activities anyway are linked to the space industries. You know, our sat-nav, for example, our GPS watches.
Well, of course, I understand that spending on the science which is involved in space exploration is in itself a good thing, but ultimately it's a question of priorities, isn't it? We have to cut our coat according to our cloth. Because the government made a deliberate decision to tank the economy over COVID, we are now in a terrible financial situation. The government is still borrowing £100 billion a year. Our defence budget has been slashed to below the minimum for our national safety. And for myself, when we look at the state of the world at the minute, what's going on in the Middle East and in Ukraine, where the West is facing an existential threat on many levels, I think our defence budget on the Earth is more important than the technological budget in space. That's simply my point, is that we have better priorities.
But Neil, doesn't space help us solve the problems on Earth, such as, you know, the data from satellites helps us assess disasters and crises?
Well, yes, of course it does. But, you know, the satellite development which has taken place is not entirely due to Britain. I mean, Elon Musk, with his satellites, of course, has had a significant influence upon the conflicts which are going on around the world at the moment. So, of course, satellite technology is important. But our space budget is peanuts compared with, say, the United States. And it's folly to think that we can in any way compete with them. I just say that, you know, our defence of the realm on Earth is a greater priority than the more long-term projects which might come from space exploration.
Yeah, Andy, it's a fair point, isn't it? I mean, we're £2.6 trillion in national debt. The biscuit tin is empty. You talk about an asteroid striking the planet Earth. No doubt they blame Brexit. No doubt they blame you for that, Neil. But I'm joking aside. What about, though, this private-public partnership? Elon Musk is in the country. He has his own space programme. Of course, he flies into space for NASA. He spends the money. He does the research. What we need is a billionaire, not our own money to be spent on this.
That's a very naive view, and a view that doesn't actually understand science anyway. The fact that space science, they say, oh, well, satellites, we can't compete. It's not about competing in many respects, especially with the project which you're seeing with the agreement with Axiom. It's about cooperation. And international cooperation in science is far better than anything else. And it's one actual way to try and bring the world together betterly, whereas if you're spending all the money on military all the time, all you're doing is dividing people, which is a real problem. But when you talk about satellite technology, Britain, of course, they're not really part of it. Well, actually, we are. We were part of the satellite development programs right from the 1960s onwards. Private industry has been developing that. The government has actually fed it with feeders. And he actually admitted himself, Hamilton there, that, it's actually only peanuts for what we spent. Yeah, exactly. It's not very much at all. How much money have they spent on HS2? Is it going to work? Probably not. And they're not getting it going so far. What projects do Britain actually fund, which are a complete waste of time? If you look through it, we're spending vast sums of money, far more on the space program, that is just being drifted away totally. And we can't afford not to be involved in this, because this is really important for our future of humanity and for the future of our country. We do need to develop in these technologies. Otherwise, we will just fall behind. Let's take one simple example. Somebody develops a great piece of technology. I mean, I've been promoting space science now for nearly 50 years, since I was 7 years old. One of the students, which was gone forward, is actually working in the United States. Why did he go to the United States? There was no outlet here to do it. Anything he develops now will be funded by the United States. They will sell it back to Britain and we'll have to pay more for that. That's not a good way to go. That's not good economics.
OK, Andy Lound and Neil Hamilton.
Actually, I just want to ask Neil. I think I know the answer. But Neil, would you pay £100,000 to dine on the edge of space?
I don't think so. I think I'm a bit long in the tooth for that kind of thing now. But there was a time when I'd be game for anything, but I think Christine would have things to say if I were to propose something like that.
OK. Yeah, I bet Andy would love to.
Yeah, well, 100 grand to go to
money.
All right, chaps.
Don't we all, Andy? Don't we all?
We're going to have to leave it there.